Hello again. Page Smith was an American historian. Died in 1995. Interestingly, 2 days after his wife died. He had written A People's History of the United States in 8 volumes in the 1970s and 80s. And a few years before he died, published maybe his most famous book, Killing the Spirit, Higher Education in America. His view of the decline of education in our universities. The year before he died, 1994, Smith published this book, Rediscovering Christianity, A History of Modern Democracy and the Christian Ethic, in which he wonders whether or not the American experiment can thrive or even survive in view of changes in the way we think about ourselves, about religion, and about government. In the book, he muses upon what it was about the Founding Fathers that made them confident that the American experiment could work. For instance, he cites a lesser-known Founding Father, a Gouverneur Morris of New York, a conservative among the Founding Fathers in terms of his religious convictions and political convictions, in contrast with the prevailing deism of the most famous of the Founding Fathers, Franklin and Jefferson outstandingly. This is what Gouverneur Morris of New York said during the Constitutional Convention back in the middle of the 1770s. Quote, "The rich will strive to establish their dominion and enslave the rest. They always did. They always will. The proper security against them is to form them into a separate interest. The two forces will then control each other. Let the rich mix with the poor, and in a commercial country, they will establish an oligarchy. Take away commerce, and the democracy will triumph. Thus it has been all the world over, so it will be among us. Reason tells us that we are but men, and we are not to expect any particular intervention of heaven in our favor." And then Morris goes on to expand on this thought. "The rich will have, that is, the same effect here as elsewhere if we do not by such government keep them within their proper sphere. We should remember that the people never act from reason alone. The rich will take advantage of their passions and make these the instruments for oppressing them." Well, it's long before the invention of advertising, mass marketing. He goes on, "The schemes of the rich will be favored by the extent of the country. The people in such distant parts cannot communicate and act in concert. They will be dupes of those who have more knowledge and intercourse." Intercourse in those days had another meaning. "The only security against encroachments will be a select and sagacious body of men instituted to watch against them on all sides." There's another word that's fallen on hard times, sagacious, by which Morris means wise. So a select and sagacious body of men will watch against the rich, and maybe we'll be okay. So that was Gouverneur Morris's position. Let's see what some of the more famous Founding Fathers had to say. The framers were somewhat in doubt as to the permanence of the Constitution, because they knew that the Constitution, as they framed it, would depend upon a certain kind of population. They probably shared with John Wesley what we might call the John Wesley principle. Wesley had just founded Methodism in the previous generation, and he had a very fatalistic view of the durability of Christian reform, any kind of institutional reform by Christians. He said, John Wesley said, "Whenever riches have increased, the essence of religion has decreased in the same proportion." Many of the Founding Fathers shared Wesley's concern. If true in religion, did it follow that it must be true in civil society in the city of man? In other words, if religion decreases, Wesley was predicting, democracy and any other form of Christian work cannot prevail. Page Smith goes on to comment upon this. He says, could it not be predicted that a nation enjoying liberty and based on democratic principles would prosper? And would not that prosperity breed luxury? And with luxury would surely come the emergence of a rich and spoiled class, lacking in civic virtue or Christian austerity. And along with a class of self-indulgent rich, the concomitant appearance of a deprived and exploited class that would in time rise up in revolutionary rage. In other words, revolution would have to follow if history was anything to learn by. Jefferson, who was for the most part a prophet of the Enlightenment, believing in the natural goodness of men and women, was so concerned about the probability of this outcome that he wrote a remarkable letter to James Madison from Paris, where he was witnessing the horrors of the French Revolution, proposing that privately held property be redistributed every generation so that it could not accumulate in the hands of a few great property owners. So would you call redistribution of land capitalism? Communism didn't exist yet. So what is Jefferson actually saying? Well, it sounds more like the Jubilee system of the Old Testament. Page Smith goes on, many of the founders, John Adams among them, brooding about the luxury problem, felt that even with all the constitution's built-in safeguards designed to mitigate the abuse of power, its ultimate success must rest on the character of the people. If the people en masse became greedy and selfish, lacking in vigilance, then the republic must come tumbling down in decadence and decay. Our Constitution was written for a moral and religious people, Adams wrote, and it is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. So Adams was a pessimist among his fellow founding fathers, it's true. But I think it's more than demonstrable that the founding fathers of America, whether they agreed on or differed on religious issues, were one when it came to their confidence that the American experiment could only work where education and religion prevailed. A select and sagacious body of men, as Morris put it, would be our only protection against ultimately tyranny and revolution again. Now, the founding fathers were not necessarily evangelical, but they could see the importance that religion and moral conviction would play in the success or failure of the American experiment.